Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for a special Our Voices event. It's a conversation with director, producer Don Porter and producer Erika Alexander discussing their new documentary feature, John Lewis, Good Trouble. This event is sadly hosted in memory of John Lewis, the American hero and icon who passed away on Friday, July 17th, 2020. Before we start, I wanted to just highlight some of John Lewis's innumerable acts of courage and leadership. Often called one of the most courageous persons of the civil rights movement, John Lewis dedicated his life to protecting human rights, securing civil liberties, and building what he called the beloved community in America. His dedication to the highest ethical standards and moral principles won him the admiration of many of his colleagues on both sides of the aisle, where he was called the conscience of the US Congress. As a student at Fisk University, Lewis organized sit-in demonstrations at segregated lunch counters in Nashville, Tennessee. In 1961, he volunteered to participate in the Freedom Rides, which challenged segregation at interstate bus terminals across the South. Lewis risked his life on those rides many times by simply sitting in seats reserved for white patrons. He was also severely beaten by angry mobs and arrested by police for challenging the injustice of Jim Crow segregation in the South. During the height of the civil rights movement from 1963 to 66, Lewis was named chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which he helped form. At the age of 23, he was an architect of and a keynote speaker at the historic March on Washington in August 1963. In 1964, Lewis coordinated SNCC's efforts to organize voter registration drives and community action programs during the Mississippi Freedom Summer. The following year, John Lewis and Hosea Williams led over 600 peaceful, orderly protests across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama on March 7th, 1965, where the marchers were attacked by Alabama state troopers in a brutal confrontation that became known as Bloody Sunday. News broadcasts and photographs revealing the senseless cruelty of the segregated South helped hasten the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. John Lewis was elected to Congress in November 1986 and served as a representative of Georgia's 5th Congressional District since then until he passed away on July 17th. Tonight's conversation will be moderated by Nicole Thompson, who received her Bachelor of Arts from the College of New Jersey, where she majored in communication studies, and who also recently graduated from USC with an MFA in film and TV production, where she proudly served as the president of the African American Cinema Society for 2 years. Nicole recently founded the Black Film Alliance, which is an organization that provides resources for emerging filmmakers of color. Nicole was hired by NBA All-Star Kyrie Irving to serve as his personal cinematographer, capturing footage for his film premiere of his movie Uncle Drew, and also directing segments for Kyrie's 2019 All-Star Weekend highlights. Nicole's accomplishments include her award-winning thesis film Blackbird. Nicole was also selected to direct the short films Summer of Justice at Warner Brothers. In addition, Nicole has also been featured on the cover of Lux magazine and featured in The Hollywood Reporter as an emerging filmmaker. Nicole, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Alex, for the warm welcome. To start tonight's event, I will be reading the bios for both of our guests. But before we get started, I would like to invite everyone to join me for a moment of silence in honor of John Lewis and to reflect on his legacy. So we'll start. Thank you. Ashe. So everyone, thank you for joining once again. I learned so much from watching this documentary. It's very powerful and informative. And tonight we have joining us the director of John Lewis, Good Trouble, Don Porter. Don Porter is an award-winning documentary filmmaker whose work has appeared on the national and global platforms including HBO, PBS, Discovery, and Netflix. Her current projects include the documentary Vernon Jordan, Make It Plain, which explores Vernon Jordan's rise from the segregated South to become one of the most influential African-American thought leaders in America. Also, John Lewis, Good Trouble for CNN Films, which explores Congressman John Lewis' pivotal role in the civil rights movement, as well as his political and social activism on important issues including voting rights, immigration laws, and much more. Thank you so much, Dawn, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Also joining us is the film's producer, Erika Alexander. Erika Alexander is beloved for the iconic acting role of Maxine Shaw, Living Sting, Detective Latoya in Get Out, Perina in Black Lightning, Linda Diggs in Wu-Tang and American Saga, Barb Ballard, Run the World, and Meredith Lockhart, Swimming with Sharks. Alexander wears many hats, including actress, trailblazing activist, entrepreneur, creator, producer, and director. She's an all-around boss and co-founder of Color Farm Media and board member of Vote, Run, Lead. Alexander is on a mission to bring greater equity, inclusion, diverse representation to both media, technology, and electoral politics. Thank you, Erika, for joining us.
Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate the invitation. And I love that line, I'm an all-around boss, because I wrote it.
Lesson number 1, write your own bio.
Rep that bossness. To get started, let's talk about the genesis of the films. Can each of you talk about where the idea came about and how you both got involved with the project?
Sure, I'll start. I had done a 4-part series about Bobby Kennedy called Bobby Kennedy for President for Netflix. And John Lewis was featured in that series and told a really moving story about organizing a rally for Senator Kennedy on the day that Dr. Martin Luther King was murdered. And when he told that story, it just, kind of reignited this spark for me that there were so many stories yet untold. And so I was, like thinking about that. I had actually started gathering some archive footage on the, some people have a hope chest. I have a hope archive chest of, films I'd like to make someday. So that was in the kind of the someday chest. And then CNN came to me, and I guess they were hoping too. They had had a lot of success with their film about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, RBG, and I think they were looking for some new 80-year-olds to feature. So we kind of had a meeting of the minds, and then I got a call, and I'll let Miss Erika take it from there.
Sure, I gave her the call because, listen, you don't just call Dawn Porter out of the blue. You have to be recommended. But I've been brought on to a later project. And of course, they were looking for a captain of their ship. Somebody told us, you should check in with Dawn Porter. She's fantastic, blah, blah, blah. We started telling her about what we were doing. She says, actually, I'm doing a film about John Lewis. And so then we asked her, hey, do you mind, maybe joining forces? And that's exactly what happened. So me and my partner, Ben Arnon, and she and her partner, Chisholm, decided to get together. And this is the result. What you're seeing is John Lewis, Good Trouble. But this is all Dawn Porter. And she brought us to a wonderful sort of result just in time.
Well, we're so excited that this collaboration between the two of you came together. Can you speak a little bit about your relationship in pre-production between the two of you in your different roles?
Well, I will start. Miss Erika is a lot of fun. She's as much fun as you think. So, we just kind of hit it off right away. And I think the really important thing for directors and producers is that you share a vision and that you have mutual respect. If you're directing a project, everybody else is not just there to make your dreams come true. Like you really need to pick people who can push you appropriately, who can, give you suggestions, who can, who offer, so everybody brought their equal strength to this table. Erika's always very generous, but really no film is made by one person. So every film is a collaboration. So it's really important to pick your collaborators. And I feel really lucky. Erika came, from this nonfiction background with such a strong storytelling sense. And, you know, having seen countless hours of dramatic television, you know, could really step back and comment about the arc of our film and how, you know, how the storytelling was going. And then, you know, also I would say Erika is a creator. So she had worked, you know, has a background in all forms of creativity, including graphic novels, and she's a writer. So, you know, all of that was really, really helpful. And, you know, if you want to direct something, it's great to surround yourself with people who bring skills you don't have, because they'll see things in a different way. And, you know, I think too many people surround themselves with a chorus of like minds, and that's not what you need to make a movie. You need, you know, people who are aligned in an end result, but who may, you know, bring some other creative energy to your process. So besides that, we talk about clothes, we talk about music, we both like to eat. So, you know, movie making is hard, and you want to have people who you want to have a drink with at the end of the night, not people you want to go screaming from. So she's all that. She's boss.
To be clear, I want to say something, because Dawn is talking about, you know, she started to imprint onto me. I was so taken by her that I look and see I have at least 4 pieces of clothing that I call my Dawn Porter look. I started buying dresses that made me look and feel like her. And I think that that's important, because we talk about these things and there's a mutual love fest. There's no doubt about it. She's one of the best storytellers of her generation. She just happens to be in documentary. She's a natural born storyteller. She's also a professor, and she's a lawyer. That's like a killer thing, that suddenly is telling the story of a person whose whole life combines all those things in one, you know, lifeline. And she could understand it up ways, you know, that I could never have. But the truth is, I grew up in Hollywood, and as a Black woman, I was very excited to be working alongside Dawn. She's a talented, strong Black woman. She's not afraid to share her expertise and guide us. We are a young filmmaking team. It's a very difficult process. And besides that, we literally got to see her, how she performed inside of a very white male space. Mm-hmm. And I loved it. I am a person who needs things that I can see, and then I'll act like it until I feel it. And so John Lewis is a person that I think's imprinted on all of us, and certainly Dawn. Dawn, I saw suddenly create this entire relationship that when they were in the room, they really were just speaking to each other. They really were. And it wasn't something, you didn't feel like you were barging in on it. You said you felt like you were experiencing it, because it was so easy and lovely and respectful, but also very personal, intimate. And so that stands to what she cannot account for, which is in her DNA, which is she's having a conversation and discussion with people that has to do with energy. She's putting it out there, and it's clearing the way for somebody to give themselves over to it, be vulnerable. And she's saying, you can, here is your space. I got you. And let's tell a story. And it was wonderful to see. So it was a good thing, but I need to tell everybody it's not always the case. Good time.
It's funny you mentioned energy, because as I was watching the film from the very beginning, I felt this very powerful energy in the film. It pulls you right in. Can both of you speak to the research that went into this project? As everyone's seen, there's so much archival.
That's all her. She'll speak.
Let's speak about the research, and so, like, at least one thing you've learned new from doing research to bring this film to life.
Yeah. So, you know, we had the gift of having the congressman with us to answer all the questions. So when you have access to a person like that, you've got to come correct. You know, you've got to be prepared. So I had read his memoir, other books about him. Because I had just come off of the Bobby Kennedy film, I had really been kind of already swimming in that archive. So I kind of huddled with our archivist, Rich Remsburg. He's a spectacular collaborator, and he just kept feeding us, you know, more and more archival images. And then, you know, you literally cannot read everything that John Lewis has mentioned in because there are too many. So I had to kind of pick sources, but the best source is the congressman, you know. And the one thing I will say about him is he did not try and direct our, you know, creative effort. He never asked a question. He never said, how you doing? What's happening? What's in it? He didn't even ask to see it when we were done. You know, I took it to him. I took it to his home and was able to show it to him Valentine's Day 2020. Flew to him and I brought him chocolates, which was like, I knew his staff was going to be upset with me because he was a little diabetic, which is probably now a HIPAA violation that I've told you that. But, you know, so I brought him the chocolates because I knew he would like it. And also, like, just in case he hated the movie, then at least I brought him the chocolates. But so it was a lot of, you know, interviews with other people. I like to postpone the main interview with the subject as long as possible, because then I have all the information from the other people and I can use that in, you know, the main interview with the subject. So so we kind of put that off until we did that, you know, main interview that you see where he's in the theater and watching the archive of himself. But I will also say that, you know, on this project, because we had a good budget, we had a spectacular editor, Jessica Congdon, who had just come off of the Dolores film about Dolores Huerta, which is a beautiful movie. I had seen it at Sundance. And we had a great second editor, Sarah Cannon, and we had an assistant. And having all of those eyes is really helpful, because everybody, you know, if I fell in love with something, there were 10 people who were in love with something else. And just, you know, we had a lot of fun watching the interim cuts of this movie. And that's why I say, well, probably more than any movie I've made, this movie was made with a lot of love. And everybody felt that for him. And so all the comments were coming from that place. It was not your usual kind of ego posturing about a film and who's in charge. It was, we've got to do this right, you know? And so I think you see that on the screen. I think you see the warmth. I know that, like, our cinematographers were just like, they just loved him. And they loved following him. And I think you see that in the images. Yeah.
Watching the film, you can feel that love coming across, especially when it's the scenes where he's speaking to a congregation, and just anytime John is just blessing us with a message, you can feel the love coming across in this film. Erika, can you speak to us a little bit about just the making of the film for you? When did it begin, and like from production to post, how long was the process?
I don't know how long the process was, because I actually, you know, there was a lot of things that I had not experienced straight up front. I was able to, if there was a relationship that I could bring in, those things would happen, that type of thing. I accompanied Dawn and the crew many times, whether they were in DC or Atlanta, that type of thing. I would love for Dawn, I know you're gonna ask this, but she's gotta talk about the music, because I love Tamar and that type of thing. I mean, it's just so, you talk about love. That is the right word, Dawn is right, just full of love. But as a person who really appreciates the filmmaking process, which can be long, arduous, and kind of boring, frankly, you know, you're there, you're there. She was in Los Angeles, I came to see her, she was doing her Reverend Lawson Day. You have to understand, for me, that was a watershed day, because I was like, what do you mean? Somebody taught them nonviolence, and here this man is. I'm thinking anybody that would have done that must be dead. But the truth is, and Dawn kept bringing it back, no, they were all really young, Erika. They were really young. So the fact that they're here, the fact that she was talking to them, the fact that she had sort of thrown herself into, and then we're all playing catch up with a type of universe that they bring. It's like the Avengers. It's like you're going to visit Batman over here, and Superman over here, whatever. You know, I might be mixing up worlds. But meanwhile, Dawn is collecting the histories and following the breadcrumbs, and they're all there. She's gathering it up to create this beautiful setting for a diamond that already exists. And I have to say, that's the thing, is to get out of its way, to make sure that you are helped, not get in the way, but also to be a student, to arrive ready to learn. I have learned so much about filmmaking in this nonfiction way that will carry on in the fictional. And I was teasing Dawn to say, you know, I'm crying fictional tears or nonfiction tears. You know what I mean? Because I watched this fictional. I mean, it's a real sort of back and forth. We engage each other, but that's what I've learned, and that's what I can say about the process for me. Not about the length of time. Certainly, it took time to get it together. But watching somebody who meticulously just started to let me get this done. Let me roll up the story and then see what it creates.
That's powerful, because his lifespan, his journey, watching him from his young adulthood to where he ultimately took a seat in Congress, and it was definitely something that really touched us all. You mentioned that he was like, you know, like Batman or one of the Avengers, and I know that speaks true to a lot of us here to see, you know, modern heroes from the civil rights era still fighting that good fight.
Did you see how she filmed him with the big old screens? But it was, you know, they don't give Black characters that kind of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
She gave him the Lux car wash. You understand? The full detail. And guess what? He could contain extra wax, baby. It was beautiful. And she set a new standard, a gold standard. Like, don't come for those people like that. Make sure you give them their due. And now we get to see one of the founding fathers of America and say, this is how you treat that. It was beautiful, beautiful.
I agree, and I'm so happy that this was even able to take place. And as you said, we were able to give him his roses, like, and be able to enjoy them, to see this experience, and just capture that history. Can you both speak to the importance of capturing our history and using film as a medium to bring that to life?
You know, one of the things that was so exciting about this project is exactly that, is being able to work, you know, with him and know that he was going to see it. So, you know, even things like deciding how to do his main through line interview. Like, I always knew from the very beginning that he was gonna, you know, be there taking us through this life's journey. But as Erika said, I think there was a really key kind of creative moment. We were following the congressman. He leads a pilgrimage every year to Selma to retrace that trip from Montgomery to Selma and then across the bridge. And when you do that, you know, there's a whole group of congressional delegation, there's a whole group of people. But what it does is, because you have several days of slowly getting to the place before you march across that bridge, you're slowly brought along with the story. And, you know, I, as a filmmaker, I appreciated that storytelling. So, you know, we began in Montgomery and we went to Civil Rights Museum and we went to church, and we had all these, you know, all together as a group of 100 people, we were doing all these activities. So by the time everybody walked across that bridge, we were all of one mind. We were in the same space, ready to receive that moment. So while we were on that pilgrimage, we went to Bryan Stevenson's beautiful Civil Rights Museum and monument. And the congressman was watching footage of himself as a young man. And he said, "I can't believe that's me. I just can't believe that's me." And so it just gave me the idea to bring him back through the footage of his life. So we made all these short films of just archive, and then, rented a theater in Washington, D.C., and sat him in the middle, and then had him, one of the things you have to know is what environment does your subject need in order to access the deepest part of their story. So for the congressman, if he's in his DC office, there's votes and there's people coming in, that's a distraction. If he's at home, he actually really cares about if his house is messy. And so he would be like really worried about us because he's a good host. So I was like, he needs to get out of both environments and be, almost confessional, right? So then showing him and having him react to that footage kind of brought him back, and he started telling us details, just like that day in the museum. So he started telling us details, that was my seatmate, or just reacting to seeing, different images. But then the other thing that became so clear was that he should be direct to camera, that you have to engage this man. You can't turn away. You have to listen to him. I was like, your big old head's gonna fill the screen and there's nowhere else to look. Like, you must engage his story. And, so that was very deliberate. I'm like, who can tell John Lewis's story better than John Lewis? So he should tell his story. So that became like the core kind of through line. So we begin with him and we end with him. And so he has the first word and the last word. So.
Well, I'm so glad you decided to create that format. I felt like as I was watching it, I was hanging on his every word. I just felt like there was so much wisdom to be passed on, and I just needed another second with it. And can you, for those who are on the line who may not have had a chance to see the film yet, because I know there might be some who's coming in later on, but for those who haven't seen the film, can you explain a little bit about the title, Good Trouble, and what, John Lewis, his whole concept of what good trouble is? Can you speak to us about it?
Sure. It's important to remember that the congressman grew up in the time of Emmett Till. He grew up when being a young Black boy, and you look or alleged to have looked at a white woman could get you killed. And so his parents very rightfully were concerned about him. And, he was asking, he would see signs that, segregation signs. He was denied a library card. I mean, when you think about segregation, what I think about is it's all designed to humiliate. It's all designed to otherize and to degrade. What possibly could be the problem with giving somebody a library card? Like, what is that about? So he was questioning all these things because he felt that they were wrong. And his mother in particular would say, that's the way it is. Don't get in the way, don't get in trouble. And he kind of turned that, around and said, well, he was going to get in trouble, but he was going to get in what he called not only good trouble, but necessary trouble. And I like to actually focus on the necessary, because what he and the other civil rights activists did was necessary. When you think about a 19-year-old John Lewis and other activists planned, executed, and stopped, they integrated downtown Nashville after, a century of segregation. That is awesome. And that shows that what they were doing was necessary. It was not always supported. It was not supported by the NAACP. The Freedom Rides were not supported by the NAACP. The older people were saying that it's too fast, it's too dangerous. And, he and it was the young people. And they were like, nope, he didn't want to live on a system of systematic humiliation and degradation. He was like, that is not the life I want for myself.
And, just really quickly, to be clear with what Dawn said, she's right. What was wrong with the library card, which we know very well that knowledge is power. They were stopping him from his power. And they have done that to Black people with the suppression of votes. They stop us from gaining power, acknowledges it. And she is doing that movie with Vernon Jordan, who did with the UNCF say a mind is a terrible thing to waste. And you're right, it is something that seems so small, but was the key to his freedom was getting a good education and learning more about what he could do to free himself of that severe racism that he said he hated. Yeah.
Indeed, the power of knowledge and the ability for us to essentially level up with gaining that knowledge is truly necessary. And as you mentioned, good trouble, necessary trouble. Dawn, can you speak to us if you saw any similarities between the civil rights movement in your research with the current Black Lives Matter movement and the necessary trouble that some people are getting in currently?
Absolutely. And I think, I see that the congressman saw it too and was immensely proud of the peaceful, demanding of equal treatment and pointing out, wrongs. I did a great event, the Atlanta Press Club, where a young activist, a young Black Lives Matter activist, told a story. She actually was one of the creators of the Women's March. And before there was a big fancy Women's March, she said it was just her and a bunch of people. And they walked from New York to Washington, D.C. They told the whole congressional delegation they were coming. And the only person there to meet them was John Lewis. And he was there clapping and waiting for them and greeting them. And he did not do that for the cameras. You haven't seen a picture of that. He did that for them because he knew what it was like to be that young person who everybody said was crazy and out of their place. And, none of this would matter. Well, it does matter. We saw, that young activist being inspired and keeping, going. Then we get the Women's March and we know that, what a success that was. So I know that he really was proud of particularly the peaceful, demands for recognition. So I see that too. I also know this young woman said when she saw the film that she realized really deeply how much history there was to what she was instinctively doing. And it kind of gave her the strength to fight another day. Well, we must be on to something because it has worked, so much in the past. And so that's part of the reason for this movie, why I'm really thrilled to have support of CNN. We have our release plan right now, but then it will be on CNN in the fall. So this conversation will keep going. It's not going to disappear.
And that's why we're so thankful for this to be out into the world right now. I think so many people need to see this film and need to have that, energy revitalized so that they continue to keep fighting the good fight. Before we transition into audience Q&A, I'm going to ask one more question, but I just want Alex to gear up to get our first audience Q&A going. And to preface that, the next question I'm going to ask is, for those who are documentary filmmakers who have an interest in it and don't know where to begin, because I know there are many students on this line, do you have any advice, either you for, enthusiasts to learn how to get into the world of documentary filmmaking?
Yeah, part of it is you should just do it. It's never been more accessible, the documentary medium. And if you have a great story, I would encourage you to think through your story. It's not just picking up a camera and pointing it at something. It's actually thinking, the thing about documentary is you have to want to say something. We're not just the news. We're not just pointing and saying, this is what happened on Tuesday. It's a curated selection of images and words that lead to some sort of understanding. That's my view of documentary. So if you want people to understand something, you have to have something that you're investigating and something you want to say. It doesn't mean you have to tell people what to think, but your what you want to say may be, look over here at these people and what they're doing. That may be what you want to say. You may be a more opinionated type, person. I enjoy, kind of constructing a story about what leads people to take action. Like why do some people step outside of their comfort zone and do things that the rest of us don't when we're equally upset about injustice? So I would say the first thing is like, have a story, think about what you want to say. And the second thing is, if there's some piece of the process that you're intimidated by or worried by, get your friends, get some people who are, you find a friend, phone a friend. Like you need to get some people who have experiences that you don't. So if your friend's a good cinematographer, ask her to join you. If you have somebody who's good with graphics, like, this is a collaborative medium. And, listen to, the biggest piece of advice for people who are kind of off to the races a little bit and who are about to get notes, like we all don't like notes. Nobody likes notes. Everybody gets notes. Nobody likes notes. But what I try and do is listen when people say there's something that bothers them. Don't necessarily listen to their suggested solution. But if people are saying, I don't understand, or I got confused, or I got bored here, you should listen to that. Figure out your own solution, but listen. Don't discard the note, as, because a lot of this is scary. And, there's a lot of money and time. You're very exposed when you make a movie. Like the first time I played a movie at a festival, I felt my face getting hot, and I was like, well, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done. If it fails, everybody's gonna see. So just know that everybody feels that way. It is very intimidating, but you can do it. You really can do it.
I would say, as an actress, you get your notes in real time, so you get your notes right on set. Hi, Erika. Okay, good job. But could you, and it's like that type of thing. But I do appreciate it because there's growth in that. And she's absolutely right. It's tuning your ear toward it. And some people don't know what they're talking about, and they really have no business being there, sort of infecting their version on you, and that's different. And then there are people who really do have your best interest in mind and may be able to see, but it's all for you to take in or throw out. You do not have to. You can keep it moving. I also want to say the great experiment of your life goes on every day. And so it is possible to film that and see if you can make it dramatic. Maybe the first experiment you can do is on yourself and say, spend a day in a life of your own life and see if you can gather.
That's a great suggestion. I love that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, see, I impressed Dawn, who teaches this stuff. So, I'm just thinking of all the people who think that it has to be outside of you. If you can make your own life inherently dramatic and or see inside of it in a way, and take your phone in mind's eye, we're doing it all the time in this selfie type of way, but to intentionally try to do that, then maybe you can create a series of Groundhog Days to see how it changes and whether you can escalate it. And that might be a really simple way.
I'm going to take that and tell people it was my idea, because that's what directors do. They just take stuff from other people. They're like, one day I thought maybe the Titanic would be an interesting movie.
Nice.
It was all me.
Erika, this is being recorded. We have proof.
It's all good. You think I'm gonna argue against the queen? Forget it. Just do it. Keep it moving.
Well, Dawn and Erika, both great advice. Alex, can we welcome the first question from the audience?
Yes. So I'd like to invite over James Costigan, who's
James Costigan.
So, James, I'm going to move you over to the panelists section, and you can turn on your video if you want to, if you're ready.
You know what, James Costigan? I order you to turn on your video.
There we go. Hi, Miss Porter.
Hi.
Everyone.
You know each other?
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
Um, I was gonna ask you because I've heard a lot about how your children sort of have influenced your perspectives on these things. Um, I was gonna ask, sort of with such an icon now no longer with us, what do you see with the sort of the future of this type of activism, and what kind of leaders we have to look forward to?
That is a great question. I see, and I know the congressman saw because we spoke about it. I see that he was very calm and secure that the next generation of leaders are paying attention and are like really fierce. So what I'm encouraged by is that you, a college freshman, and people your age, so James is a high school classmate of my son, Eli. My son, who never met something he didn't want to protest, as I'm sure James will attest. Now, thankfully, his protests are all directed at me. So, but I see, I see Emma Gonzalez and the gun activist. I see Greta Thunberg and all of the other young women and men of color around the world taking on climate change. And I feel like I feel like I can take a step back and amplify their efforts, and I think that is something that I learned from the congressman, which is everybody can have something to say, and it's really the people who step forward to say it. And, the adults in the room really need to make space for the young people who have something to say. Because ultimately, we've been through a lot of the big milestones in our lives. Yours are ahead. And so who has more at stake than people who are, 18, 19. So thank you for that question and for showing yourself.
Yeah, thanks for saying hi.
Nice to see you.
Okay, so let's go ahead and call on one of our incoming production students, Ella Grace Rodriguez.
Hi, it is such an honor to just ask you guys a question. I loved your documentary so much. I studied the civil rights last year for an extended research project, and I just fell in love with it. And so I'm definitely not as much as the amount that you guys poured in, but I just had a quick question. So Dawn, you mentioned earlier how Lewis's story is untold, which I thought was a little bit ironic just because he was a civil rights activist and congressman and kind of, an emblem of the movement. But I guess to both you, Erika and Dawn, what pieces of the documentary did you think were kind of untold pieces of John Lewis's story?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that people who know John Lewis, usually know that seminal moment on the bridge. They know about that march. They might know about the freedom rides. They might know, but most people don't remember that he was the youngest speaker at the March on Washington. So part of what I wanted to do is back those moments up and talk about the effort that it took to get to that moment of marching across the bridge. They didn't just wake up and decide to march. There was so much strategy and planning. And I think, when we talk about deconstructing racism, it's really important to think about how we describe people, particularly people of color. So if we only describe a John Lewis as brave, we don't make space for that part of him, which was a strategist, right? So those young people met for months in a church basement, organizing, planning, and figuring out their strategy. So part of what I wanted to emphasize was that, their strategy. On the personal side, I always feel like it's important that we not deify our heroes, that we not try and make him a saint, that we acknowledge that he's a person, because if John Lewis is a person with flaws and, you know, all of the flaws of humanity, then maybe all of us can say, you know, and actually this was something that I talked about a lot with the congressman, because I would, you know, say to him like, oh, this happened or that happened. And I would complain about politics. And he would kind of guide the conversation to like, all right, well, what can you do? You know, what can you do? Instead of frustration at all the things you can't do. I'm not brave. I'm not gonna confront the police. I am awed by people who do that. But what can I do? I cannot allow casual racism in my presence. I could do that, you know? I can financially and also with amplification support people who are out there in the front lines. I can do that. So when you twist it around to what can you do instead of all the things that you can't, you stand in your power. And that is definitely something I learned from him. And then the last thing I'll say is I loved that the congressman is a whole person. He loves art and music and dancing. He's not always the fierce warrior on the bridge. He likes Pharrell, you know, he likes, he, you know, wrote the book and then he dressed as himself, like for Comic-Con. I mean, there are just so many, you know, other pieces of his humanity. And that's something else that he taught me is you can't be fierce all the time. You need to have a quiet, personal time for regeneration. So those are some of the other things that I thought. And when you bring out those aspects of your character, you help your audience understand that person, you know, even more deeply. Thanks for that question.
I just want to say one thing too. I love that Dawn focused on the training. I can't say enough how that made him not only accessible, but feel like I could do it. I thought these people just rose out of the earth like gods and saints and or orcs if you on the other side. And, you know, and then battled. But when I saw that they were going through systems and methodology and philosophy, I said, I'd be damned. This is something that you can strive to, you can aspire to. I appreciate that. And I certainly loved the fact that she showed him on his land and showed that they had land. I never thought when he was talking about those chicken stories that was his land. And so that was literally one of those things where I said, oh, it's wonderful to see him with his family and his sisters and brothers on the land. And Dawn so wonderfully reminds people in this country that Black people have ownership and that they contributed and they weren't just working for people, they were working for their own self-good in that they own the land. It's huge. It's a huge breakthrough for somebody like me.
And just to kind of piggyback off of that, there were so many parts of, you know, listening to and watching John Lewis's story that I learned from. And I know many other people learn from as well. Growing up, a lot of us didn't have the opportunity to learn about him in the textbooks. You know, there's always a small portion of, you know, Black history, but through this documentary, we're bringing this to life. And I'm so glad that that's an opportunity. Alex, do you mind going to Mr. Jordan with his question?
Thanks, Ella.
Thank you, guys.
So, Nikki, we're trying to make sure that we can verify everyone before we bring them on.
Okay.
So, Mr. Jordan? Okay, so we'll talk about that back channel, but let's go first to another current student, which is a Wells writing student, Seth Woodhouse.
Hi, thanks for coming here. My question is about the structure, which I thought was really interesting, especially in terms of using the midterms and interweaving that with a story. And you don't then go through a story chronologically. I was wondering how you came on that structure.
That's a great question. You know, when you're working with an editor, you try a lot of different structures. So I knew I didn't want to do chronological because I really wanted to place him in the present. So it was really important to me, even just a little bit, to start with the today and then reflect back, because as important as the look back is, I felt like what I really want to know is how what happened in the past is influencing him today. And so if you start with the present, then your mind is always thinking, oh my goodness, that young man is alive. He's here today, doing things. And when am I going to get back to the present? So that's Jessica, the editor, and I worked, so kind of we cut scenes from the present day that we knew. We cut those scenes first, and then we used the archive to kind of amplify those scenes. So you have to have like a primary focus. You have to know where you're going to start, at least in your cut. You don't have to know your very beginning, but you need to know like what's your through line. And my through line in my head that I settled on really early was, kind of, this is not really that PC, but what happens to old civil rights workers? Where do they go? What do they do? And there are so many that we don't know who they are today. They're frozen in time. And I wanted to unfreeze him and bring him into the present and point out, like, it's a different thing when you are sitting on the floor of the Congress for gun rights, when we know that he sat in Nashville in the 60s, right? He's been doing this his whole life and it works. And so that I hoped would bring a different level of depth and understanding to what he was doing today. So, great question.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question, Dawn? Because I just thought of talking about him sitting there on the floor. Oh shoot, my question went out of my head. I'm gonna figure it out. I'll be back.
Eric, as you figure out your question, I'm gonna chime in with a question from Mr. Jordan. His question is, has anyone approached the school systems about having a permanent curriculum incorporating John Lewis? Would you be aware of that?
So we are, as part of the film team, one of our fantastic partners is an organization called Participant Media. And Participant, we are doing a number of social action campaigns along with the film. So we have, if you go to makegoodtrouble.com, you can check your voter registration, make sure you're registered. You can also support good government, nonpartisan people who are just protecting the right to vote. They're not telling you who to vote for or anything like that. It's literally just preserving the right with right to vote. So on the school side, we hope by September that we will have an easy way to make the film available first to colleges and universities, and then we'll move on to high schools. And so we're doing also a lot of fundraising to make sure that, all schools, regardless of resources, can have access to the film. And then that will be accompanied by a curriculum guide by, certified teachers to lead people through. Films are a starting point. And so my hope is that people's curiosity and interest will be triggered, and they'll go up. There are many more films to be made and books to be written about this great man. And so, this is one version, but there's so much more to say and discover. I don't think any one film is ever the complete story of a person. So I look forward to seeing, who takes up that mantle, who's gonna add to the story. Maybe it's gonna be one of you. Maybe Alex, it's one of your students.
Listen,
Dawn, real quick, I just want to say, in terms of, you said it works, I was thinking about when they were in that place sitting on the floor, they took the cameras out. Remember, they didn't want to show them on the floor. Do you think that's
right.
something to do with them not wanting to have that archival footage of this powerful thing, and you take out the documentation? Turned out they all had cell phones, but what do you think about it?
That it's really interesting. I think that I hadn't thought about that, but now I'm wondering, things that make you go,
It just occurred to me that was the first thing they removed, is they didn't, somehow that power would, it's deep. Okay.
It's deep.
I'm glad you shared that little nugget with us, because there will always be things that go unfilmed and things that, you guys had to be able to experience on the back end. can you speak to us, Dawn, about the, hours and hours of footage? I can only imagine how much was filmed to create this, 2-hour documentary.
Yeah, well, like I said, we had gathered a lot of footage for Bobby Kennedy's story. And in the process of making that film, there was so much footage of Congressman Lewis, because once you get to the 60s, you can't talk about civil rights without John Lewis showing up someplace. So kind of inspired by that, the archivist kind of took a really deep dive and was looking around to a lot of different sources. So we had the networks that were covering the civil rights movement, and we found that wonderful film of NBC that just luckily followed John Lewis and Bernard Lafayette and had them as young men talking about their experiences. We found that amazing training footage, which was so important to what they did. And then, some other pieces of footage. Some of actually my favorite are still images, like Erika speaking to, of the now congressman on the floor with a bandage on his head with papers all around, because we're all familiar with what it feels like to be gathered and to get on the floor and just be comfortable and spread out and be, kind of the general, right, leading your troops the next day. So I felt like that was something people could relate to, that kind of like all night session where you're getting ready for your next thing. So we had a lot of footage to go through. It was hard to select. And I do want to also not forget to speak about the music, because films are layered exercises, and so the composer for this film is a woman named Tamar Kali, and she had recently done the music for Dee Rees in Mudbound. And she is an African-American woman who's got Gullah Geechee ancestry. Her ancestors also still own their land. She really understood what I wanted to do about, drawing that connection. John Lewis, would tell the story of his farm and his parents. And you think about that, sharecropping is subsistence living. It is a system that is not meant to enrich or elevate the sharecroppers. It is for the benefit of the landowners. And so the fact that his parents were able to scrape together several $100s to buy the land is it says to you something about the people that he came from and the family that he came from. It also says how important that land was. And so when he started to speak up and speak out, this is not an abstract idea that, Martin Luther King, Dr. King said, you can't challenge segregation at Troy State because your parents could lose their home. They could lose this thing that was so precious to them. But Tamar Kali understood all of that. And so I asked her to write a modern spiritual, like for you directors out there, when you're working with people whose disciplines are different from your own, like you may not speak music, you may not speak their language. So don't be afraid to just speak English. Talk in the terms that you have and let them translate it. Like, don't go trying to be like syncopated beat and an undone drum. Like you don't know what you're talking about. So just speak English and let her do her thing. And so I basically said like themes: land, power, family, connection, rooted, but also modern spiritual. Bring this connection between the past and the present. I want to bring the spirituals of old that supported and nourished Black people and bring them into the present. And I just think she did that so beautifully.
Wow. Just hearing you mention that you were looking for a modern spiritual, that is just so timely and so powerful that you even like that was your language for getting her to bring together the sounds of this film. So thank you for sharing that. Alex, if we have time for another question.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as Dawn, as long as you and Eric, as long as you have a moment, we still have a few more questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. Let's go to Maria Doctor, who is an alumna from our production division. So Maria, moving you over.
I like this version of being able to see people.
It adds something special. But, you know, obviously we're trying to make sure we know who's asking questions.
This is true.
Hi.
Maria.
Hi. Thank you so much for making the documentary. I know these things are labors of love and can interfere with your personal lives in a big way. So just kudos to you all for making the sacrifice, telling this really important story. I have I guess a kind of serious question for both you, Don and Erika, and then a fun one. I'll start with a fun one. Did you ever dance with the congressman?
Sadly, no.
I wish.
Actually, no, that's not true. We danced in the church. We all danced in that scene where he's right before he says, "Get with it, Michael." Everybody was dancing. It was fantastic. So
Was that with
people
Don?
were people were crowded around him, but everybody was dancing in that. So that was great. Just not too happy.
Right. That was a really pleasant surprise. I also want to mention one of my favorite moments was when one of his staffers asked him if he had ever spoken to a crowd that large. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I spoke to the March on Washington." And that goes to, Nicole, your comment, which growing up, many of us in the United States didn't learn about his role in the March on Washington. So just thank you for sharing that moment. And this more serious question, just to kind of play off of, you mentioned you have some people have a hope chest, you have an archival chest of, future projects, dream projects you'd love to do. Both, if we have time, Erika and Dawn, if you don't mind sharing one or two of those, what those might be.
Sure, I'll start. I mean, I'm actually just locking picture on my next film, which is about Pete Sousa, Obama's White House photographer, and he took 2 million pictures during the Obama years. He also was Reagan's personal White House photographer, and it's a film about leadership, honor, and character. And that it'll be out in September.
Well, thank you, Maria. Nice to meet you. I'm doing a first directorial thing it's actually co-direction. Thank you. I was inspired. Don got me on my way, but it's about reparations. And it happens to be featuring the Alderman Robin Rue Simmons, who actually passed a real reparations bill, the first in history. So just following that. And then also, I do film and television, and I'm making a movie about the Boys Choir of Harlem and different things like that. But I definitely understand documentary a lot better, having seen this process go down. And so now everything is a documentary to me. I do Ice Cream Man.
It's a disease.
I see. I look at the Ice Cream Man talking about, I wonder, he got a story. It's a lot. You can't
My
go to
children actually say to me all the time, they're like, "Do not speak to anyone," as we're walking, they'll be like, "Do not even talk to anyone." So.
Yeah, I get it. There you go. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, ladies. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Erika, we're very excited to hear you're going to start your director debut.
Yes. It's been going on for a year now. The COVID thing has stopped everything. But then again, now I realize that's part of the story, just is.
Now that you brought that up, can you both just share a little bit about what does it look for you two as creators in the midst of this COVID-19 world?
Well, Erika's just in that room. Every time I see her, she's just in that room.
Who's around to other people's houses? I hear stuff going around, but Dawn is always in the room too. I have seen the length of time and as many interviews that anyone I have ever seen in my life do. So she's been dedicated to this film. And this is my new cell, and I will be able to, for good behavior, be let go very soon.
One of the things about being a documentary person is you have to be flexible and creative. So, you know, when we're not able to travel, I've done things like send a camera. You know, we sent a camera package to Pete Sousa. I did a Zoom interview with a crew in her house with Ambassador Samantha Power. Like, you just kind of figure it out. Every film has problems, and your films will all have problems. And, you know, that's part of the creativity, is you set the bar high and then you work with what you can actually do. So, but you should have a goal. You know, you might not be able to do it the way that you want, but, you know, so the first the first bid we had for putting the congressman and surrounding him with images, I wanted to have this 3-day experience. And we went to this commercial person who had done it, and he had this amazing stage. And then the quote was $250,000. So we didn't do that. So, you know, but I had an idea. So I started with the idea, and then you work back to your, you know, tin cup version, which, by the way, worked just as well. So.
Well, it was definitely lovely to see him in front of the screen and, you know, watch images of himself. Alex, do you have our next audience member?
Yep. And I do have to go, so I could probably take one more.
Yeah, okay, so we will make this the last question. Let's go out to Carla Reed. All right, Carla, you're on our side.
Color Wheel of Death. Okay.
Oh, I think we lost.
Okay, I got it. Sorry. There we go. Oh, and look who my Zoom background is. I found it very powerful for a meeting I had Friday that was very uncomfortable, but I felt like I was on the right side of history, so it was great. So my question is, as Black women working on this film with other Black women and telling the story of a Black man, you know, how were there advantages to that? Were there disadvantages to that? Was there a shorthand you could take? If you could speak to that, I just, because I don't know if you've ever had that opportunity to have a Black producer, Black director, Black woman doing the music for the film, Black subject.
Black cinematographers.
Yes. Okay, sorry.
You know, I think for me, I'll just speak for myself, but for me, one of the biggest things is the congressman definitely reminded me of my elders. You know, he reminded me of my grandmother. I understood his faith tradition very well because I went to church with my grandmother. So I think, I do think that I probably approach them with, you know, like it would never cross my mind to call him John. It would just never cross my mind because
Never.
That's not what you would do, right? So I always say Mr. Lewis or Congressman, and kind of, you know, use those interchangeably. Just like every single one of my grandmother's friends is Miss So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so. I understand the tradition of the Black church. I understand how politics are often in the DNA of the Black church. My great-grandfather was a minister at a large church in New York City. So I think that those things were very helpful. You know, I think that a white director would probably be as respectful. I just know for me, it felt very easy to understand. I had also heard, you know, my family tell so many stories about segregation that I didn't have to work to imagine that humiliation and pain. Like my ancestors experienced it, my children experience it, I experience it. And I think that when you understand the depth of the pain that discrimination causes, it's easy to access that in your subject because I knew what he was talking about. He didn't have to explain it to me. I knew exactly what he was talking about. So I do think that was helpful. I think for particularly, I know for Tamar Kali, like that's why she did the movie, because she loved him and what he stood for. This was the documentary she was going to pick to add her talents to. And as for the cinematographers, I work with them all the time. I trust them, but I knew particularly with this subject that they were going to be all in. They took pictures with every subject. And I just, you know, I knew, but for, you know, for our whole crew, we had a white German guy in DC who was our main guy doing the sit down interviews, and the reverence, you know, you choose your crew. I almost call it casting of the crew, because they represent me, and they also protect me, you know. I have worked with all of them for a long time. It was like total A game, you know. I knew every single person that we brought into the congressman's orbit would respect, honor, and give 190% to him, because they knew how important it was that he was approaching his 80th birthday, you know. And at the time, you know, you know that you as he said, you only pass this way once.
I just want to say something really quickly about that too. A lot of the people that were asked to do the interviews had office and staff that were of color. And there is a shorthand that you can have very quickly that you can establish when they say, okay, what is it? And of course they'll do it for, but then there again, you're sort of saying, okay, we're gonna need to do this because you know that person. I mean, I got you, don't worry. We got hair, makeup, boom, boom. And that same person comes in and knows what they're going to be looking for. Black people always, they do things and they're afraid that they'll be disrespected, as Dawn says, and or taken for granted. And the minute you establish that you honor their time, you see them and you know what they've accomplished, and you're able to even joke with them and give them their due, they give you everything. They want to be helpful. They want to come through. The staff feels good that they put them someplace that they
can trust.
Yeah, and it's a shorthand. And so I appreciate that. And whether you're Black or white, that's what goes on. That's why representation matters. And so with Carla, you rightly picked out that around this subject, it really mattered. But it turns out if you were talking to President Clinton, his chief of staff is Black. And there's a lot of Black people that you can easily just have a shorthand to say, they may not know who I am, but that person will. And they're like, got you, don't worry, don't come, I got you. And they got you.
But, you know, and we definitely saw that with the interviews with Representative Cummings. He was the first interview that we did. You know, Representative Clyburn, like those men who are not household names knew from the moment we walked in the room, you know, that we honored them. They didn't have to prove to us, we had to prove to them that we were worthy of telling their stories. And I think, you know, that shows. They spoke about the congressman. That's part of what I was saying before about creating the environment in which to go to that deeper level. So, and Alex, yeah, happy to answer that the next one. So thank you, Carla.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you both for being so gracious with your time.
So we got this question from Donna Brown Guillaume, and she's graciously saying that she doesn't need to be on camera, but I will allow her to make that choice. So Donna, if you choose when you come over, if you just want to use your mic, you're welcome to, but otherwise you can also turn on your video.
Hello, thank you. I don't know if you can see me or not.
Right now we can hear you, but I can try and ask you to turn on your
video. Don't worry about it. And I wrote my question out and I can't remember exactly what it said. First of all, kudos to you, Dawn, and the whole team for a fabulous film. It's really brilliant. Really brilliant. My question specifically is about the 15-minute interview that Oprah Winfrey does at the end, because it's wonderful, and she really puts her journalist hat back on. You know, it kind of took me back to remembering that's what Oprah did. You know, when when we first became aware of her, she was interviewing people on her show constantly, and she's a journalist. So that was a wonderful touch. It really added a lot because it was very recent. So it was great to see the congressman interact with her at the end there. It just was, it was like a cherry on a sundae. So my question is whether or not you're going to be able to, is that going to be part of the film everywhere it goes, or was that just for this special screening?
Thank you for that. I'm glad you appreciated that. Ms. Winfrey loves the congressman. And when we were doing our press, you know, dream world, it was, oh, could we have her? We originally, before the COVID, we had a plan to have a special screening in the Oprah Winfrey screening theater at the African American Museum. And so originally we had invited her to host that special screening. And when everything shut down, she agreed to do this special interview. I happened to be working on a series with her about mental health. So, but she did this for the congressman. She didn't, like, I do not get it twisted. She did not do it for me. She did it for the congressman because she really admires him. But so I will tell you this about her. She's incredibly busy, as you all know. She's on, I don't know how she's like recording everything from the COVID, but she is. So she had said, we just said, can you do 15 minutes with him? You've interviewed him before, you know, blah, 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 blah. She gave us 45 minutes. She, you know, we hired a Zoom producer. So she allowed us to outfit her home studio with multiple angles so we could really do justice to the interview. So she very generously gave of her time. And so that interview is a special bonus to anyone who watches during the theatrical run. It will only be available during this. We're supposed to be in the theaters now, so you were, so this is a special kind of, we know everyone's at home and sad, and she did that for us. So it will not be part of the CNN broadcast. It will be available only for people who rent or see the film through these special screenings.
Thanks. It was terrific. Really.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, when I saw it, and she, and then she called me right after, and she was like, "Did I get it?" I'm like, "Yes, you know you got it." Like, she's, you know, like, I think I'm a pretty good interviewer, and I was like, oh man, she just like,
no, it was tasty.
Like, I almost wish I could show you all the, you know, the raw, because what she would do is just slow it down and draw it out, turn the question in a slight way until she, respectfully, you know, until she got like a little bit more. And then, you know, she watched the film before. So she really gave a lot of time to us, you know, and she's doing this without any, no one would, you know, it's not for TV. It's not for anything other than respect and love for him. So she gets nothing for it. She's not paid. She's not promoting, like, it's nothing. It is because she honors his life. That's why she did it. Well,
that may be one of the last interviews he ever did. So she does get something.
And that's right. Yes. So, you know, if you have to have a send off, it's that, and actually Al Roker. Al did one with him as well.
Wow. Well, beautiful job.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Alex. You pronounced my name right too.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
Nice to meet you.
You too, Erika. Love your work, Erika.
Thank you, love. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you. And we're so lucky to even have that as an add-on bonus for the theatrical release. And I just want to reiterate to everyone, we're so thankful to Erika and Don for joining us. It's been absolutely phenomenal. We're thankful for your time watching this film. If not anything, I just wanted to invite everyone to make sure you go out and vote. as Dawn mentioned earlier, take that action, please, please, please. Use your voice and vote. I'm going to pass it over to Alex to close us out.
Oh,
Great job, Nicole.
Great job. www.johnlewisgoodtrouble.com. You can go there and recommend it for your friends and family to watch.
Before we let you go, I also really wanted to thank Liz from Participant and Ronnie and Megan from Seed and Spark. And of course, they all made the screening component of this possible. I also really wanted to thank Ben Arnon from Color Farm, since that was the beginning of this whole conversation. And of course, Joanne in your office, Dawn. And the three of you, thank you so much for giving us your evening. I'm so glad that we were able to share this story, this film, and your experiences with all of our students and alumni.
Thank you so much. We would appreciate, if you like it, rating it on iTunes and Amazon. There's a few haters who are kind of ruining things for everybody. So
we'll get the Trojan Mafia on that.
Yeah. Trojan Mafia.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. I'll let Ben know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.
I'm sorry, everyone out there who didn't get their question asked. We got a lot. So I appreciate you guys asking them, and join us next time.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.